Did you know the world's strongest animal is actually the beetle?
Relative to body size, yes. But beyond that, think again. Greetings and welcome there, people of YouTube. This is Essence of 40, and of course I'm continuing with my series, Less Than Incredible Creationists Who Defy Logic. So without further ado, let's get straight into the new segment.
In fact, in one test, the rhinoceros beetle carried over 850 times its own weight on its back. That would be like me trying to carry 130,000 pounds. I don't think so.
And what does this tell you about the apparent perfect design of the human body?
Now let's take a look at the world's tallest animal.
I'm just going to say that the animal you have chosen is like the Titanic, and Richard Dawkins is like an iceberg. I would advise all on deck to abandon ship.
A bull giraffe is about 18 feet tall. In order to get blood up that long skinny neck against gravity, the bull giraffe has to have a powerful pump, and that's his heart. And the heart of a bull giraffe can be as much as 2.5 feet long. Big, powerful pump. Now, as he's going along here, living his life, everything's just fine, but all of a sudden, this 18-foot tall creature decides, I need a drink of water. So he bends his head down to get a drink of water. Now we have a problem. Because now this powerful pump, instead of pumping against gravity, is pumping with gravity. And so the heart gives a mighty squeeze, and the blood shoots down his neck, hits his brain, and bursts his brain. And so now he just blew his brains out. Okay, so he's dying, and he must be thinking to himself, I need to evolve something here to take care of my problem. When I get a drink of water, I blow my brains out. Of course, we know dead creatures don't evolve. But he doesn't blow his brains out because as he bends his head down, there are like little spigots in his artery that goes up the neck, little valves, and they close. But the last pump is beyond the last valve. And so it's enough to burst the little arterioles in his brain, but it doesn't go into his brain. The last pump kind of goes whoop underneath the brain into like a sponge. And this sponge just gently expands, and he hasn't blown his brains out, and he gets his drink of water, and now he sees a zebra kind of running up from this side, and he just ignores it. But he sees a lion coming up from this side. Oh, the lion wants to eat me, I got to get out of here. Now, how does he know the difference, by the way? Evolutionists can't explain that to us, but the fact is, here comes this lion, he's going to eat the giraffe, and so the giraffe jumps up, he runs about 5 steps, passes out. Not enough oxygen to his brain. While he's there, passed out, the lion is eating him. He must be thinking, I need to evolve something here. I got this problem. I pass out when I get up too fast. But he doesn't, of course. Well, why? Well, because God made him so that when he begins to bring his head up, the little spigots, the little valves in the artery open. The sponge under the brain gently squeezes that last little pump of oxygenated blood up into his brain. There are little valves in the vein that goes down the neck. They close. And by the time he's up and running, everything is fine, his blood pressure is fine, and he does just fine. Well, how would that evolve? He needs all of those parts, all there, all at the same time, all at once, or he's dead. And so I think the giraffe is another example of a designer. He needed a designer to design him just like he is.
Well, Dr. Martin, you are like the Michael Bay of creationism. Explosions. Explosions everywhere. Let's go over the evolutionary process of the giraffe. So to start with, like all other species, the animal that are referred to as a proto-giraffe didn't have much of a neck like it does today. This has gradually increased in length over millions of years. So let us start with the basic short neck variety. Over generations, this browser goes through periods of drought and harsh conditions, ensuring the only ones to survive are the ones with the longer necks that can therefore reach the higher browsing, and therefore survive and pass on their genetics. This gradually allows for the neck to extend until it's like that of the okapi found in the Democratic Republic of Congo or the gerenuk of Africa. However, let's say that the proto-giraffe does reach a point to which its neck can no longer grow. The offspring with this trait therefore either die out of predation due to blacking out or forming damage at the back of the brain. We may refer to this as an evolutionary cap on that singular trait. However, let's then suppose that we have offspring that develop irregularities in their blood systems, as well as develop a sponge-like system at the base of the brain to protect it. These would not necessarily have to evolve at the same time or in that order. However, once the offspring had both of these traits, they would then remove that evolutionary cap and they would be able to evolve their necks even further, only gradually to start with, but eventually would be capable of reaching greater extremes of the giraffes today. This would happen as, like before, drought and famine are still very much key factors that drive natural selection, and the proto-giraffe population with the internal traits that allowed for longer necks would be at an immediate advantage for food, not to mention spotting predators from a long distance. So you see, evolution very much can explain the origins of the giraffe.
The tallest giraffe known was named George. He resided at the Chester Zoo in England. George was 20 feet tall to the tips of his horns, which are actually called ossicones. Here's another interesting giraffe fact. Giraffes have no vocal cords.
Well, that segment held nothing of value at all, and in fact, the giraffe is the last thing you want to use as evidence for intelligent design, as it can be used to show the exact opposite if there is a designer. Going back to my Dawkins comment, there is a little present down in the description below, a link to a video in which Dawkins partakes in a dissection of a giraffe for some students and explains some very vital flaws of the giraffe, the highlight of which is the laryngeal nerve, which is remnant of our fishy past. It takes the indirect route from the base of our head, down our necks, down into the chest, around our aortic artery, and then back up to our larynx, which is there. It could have just zipped across, but no, it has to go down and back up the entire way. So yes, it's certainly worth to go and watch it. Oh, and before someone attempts to come back with the argument that the nerve aids in speech in mammals, firstly, the larynx is there. It doesn't have to go all the way down, especially in giraffes. However, when dealing with giraffes, let us remember...
Here's another interesting giraffe fact. Giraffes have no vocal cords.
So there's no argument to be had here. And please don't go on about the development of the embryo, because again that would just show even greater incompetence of your acclaimed, all-powerful, all-knowing designer.
Now here's a bird you'll see around your house.
What, that one? Nah, I don't have one of those running around the house, mate. Bloody noisy buggers they are.
But after taking a closer look at it, you might find it unbelievable.
The woodpecker is a very special little bird. The beak of a woodpecker is like industrial strength. It is stronger than other birds' beaks. He has special feet. Most birds have 3 toes out the front, 1 toe out the back. Woodpecker has 2 toes out the front, 2 toes out the back, and that's so he can climb around on a tree trunk, a vertical tree trunk, right side up, upside down, sideways. He can crawl any way he wants to. He has special tail feathers. His tail feathers are different than other birds' tail feathers. They're more resilient, they're spongy, and they're very strong and tough because he tripods himself with his 2 feet and his tail feathers so that he grabs a hold of that tree, fans out his tail feathers, and then bangs his head into the tree. Now you would think that a woodpecker would go home every night and say to Mrs. Woodpecker, "Oh, I got this headache, I was banging my head on a tree all day." But he doesn't. Why?
Well, because the traits that originally allowed them to open up existing holes very slowly, thus allowing them access to more food and thus increasing their chance of survival, gradually became more and more exaggerated over multiple generations. This trait became so exaggerated that they can now form their own holes to get at even more food.
Well, because God made him with special equipment.
Egads, isn't that a bit of a cop-out? Good old gotta eat gaps.
For instance, between his beak and his skull, there's a piece of cartilage. It acts as a shock absorber. His skull is the thickest bone per body weight of any creature. As a matter of fact, brain surgeons study the brains of woodpeckers, how they're hooked in there and everything, to help them with like trauma people in accidents, that they need to put their brains back in there. And so they study woodpeckers. The woodpecker, with his strong skull and his shock absorber and his strong beak and his tail feathers and his feet, he's all ready to go except for one thing. Once he drills his hole, he's got to get that bug out of the tree, because that's lunch. All right, well, how's he going to do that? Well, most birds, their tongue goes right to the tip of the beak. A woodpecker's tongue goes as much as 10 inches out of his beak. Now why? Well, because he's going to drill the hole, find the bug tunnel down in the tree, stick his tongue down in the tunnel, and drag the bug out. Now you would have to say, could I stick my tongue down a hole in a tree and drag a bug out? Of course not. Well, how does the woodpecker do that? Well, God made the woodpecker with little barbs on the tip of his tongue. And he will literally stab that bug larva down in there because it doesn't want to come out. But in case that's not enough, he has a little glue factory in his tongue that manufactures exactly, precisely the right glue to stick to the bug, but it doesn't stick to his beak. And so he pulls that bug into his mouth. Now we have a problem, if evolution is true.
Does it explode?
Let's say over hundreds of thousands of years.
More to the millions, but do carry on.
This woodpecker got all this equipment, and then he glues his tongue to a bug, and he swallows the bug. What just happened to his tongue? He just swallowed his tongue. You know, he dies, he just strangled himself, okay? But he doesn't. Why? Well, because as he brings the bug into his mouth, he has another little factory that manufactures the solvent to dissolve the glue. So he dissolves the glue, loosens up the bug, swallows the bug.
And this is a problem for evolution. How? Saliva is slightly alkaline, even in people. Therefore, a species given enough time and enough generations could quite easily dissolve some sticky biosecretion. The sticky substance on the tongue also doesn't have to be perfect from the start. Remember, the tongue also has a piercing thread that would allow it to stab the insect. Therefore, the glue merely acts as an insurance policy that increases the rate that the insect actually comes out the hole. Therefore, the woodpeckers that had this property, even if only slightly sticky, would be more likely to get more insects, more likely to be bigger, stronger, more likely to breed, more likely to pass on their genes to be inherited by their offspring. Therefore, over generation after generation, this trait would become more and more exaggerated throughout the entire population. Quite simple to explain, actually.
God made him that way. Woodpeckers, when they peck, they open their eyes between each peck, and they aim their beak, they focus, they aim their beak, they close their eyes, and then they hit the tree. So you hear a woodpecker out there, he's going drrr, drrr. Every time you hear that drrr, in between each peck, he opens his eyes, focuses, aims his beak, hits the tree. Why? Well, they used to think it was just to keep the wood chips out. But now the scientists have measured the force of the impact of the woodpecker's head against the tree. And the force is so great that if he did not close his eyes, he would pop his eyeballs out. So I would say, have you ever seen a blind woodpecker? No, they never miss. They never miss, okay?
Whoever said that these woodpeckers started off at great speeds? Again, you seem to believe that the extremes of evolutionary growth occur over a single generation. No, they could have started off with the slow pecking fashion just to get the grubs, but those that could peck a little bit faster could go to more trees, get more grubs, eat more, and therefore have a better chance of survival. Therefore, again, like the whole tongue thing, these woodpeckers are likely to pass on their genetics better, and this trait, being inherited, is more likely to become more and more exaggerated. No issue to be had here.
Now, one special woodpecker, the European green woodpecker. I think he's unique in all the animal kingdom. I don't know for sure, but I think he might be. His tongue is different than any other tongue, as far as I know. Our tongue starts in the back of our throat, comes up and out the front. His tongue starts in the back of his throat, goes down the throat, comes out the back of his neck, up over the top of his head. It's under the skin, comes out a little hole between his eyes, goes in one of his nostrils, and then comes out of his beak. And you would have to say, now how does that evolve? I've asked evolutionists that question. I've said, now you tell me, how and where did that tongue come from? They don't have a clue. They can't tell me. I'm saying, well, you're telling me that this bird evolved from some other creature, but there's no other creature that we know of with a tongue like that. How did that happen? They don't have any idea. So what could I say as a creationist? I would say God made that little woodpecker, and I think he made that woodpecker to challenge the evolutionary community. Because as they study that little bird, they know there is no way this little thing could evolve.
Well, that's because it didn't, and if you knew anything about your woodpecker anatomy, you would know that. You see, the part about the tongue flipping round and going out the back of the head and down the nasal cavity and back into the beak is at the very least backwards. Suffice to say, it never happened. The avian hyroid, though varying between species, operates in much the same manner. The hyroid bone consists of a Y-shaped bone found inside the beak with the base of the Y running through the tongue, that forks backwards out the back and around the base of the skull. When the right muscles are put to play, the tongue juts forward. This mechanism can be found in your everyday chicken. The same can also be found in short-tongued woodpeckers. To get the long-tongued variety, however, all you have to do is not switch the tongue around as they'd have you believe, but merely increase the fork of the hyroid. It just needs to get larger over a number of generations until it reaches back around the back of the skull, over the top, and it does move over to one side. We even see this development in baby woodpeckers of the long-tongued variety because they lack their long tongues at hatching and develop it gradually before they eventually leave the nest. So you see, no magic, no God. Oh, and because the tongue has a rigid bone running through it, that previous comment about how they would swallow their own tongue, completely false.
But it goes right back to that Romans 1 passage, that as men study the creation, it says they study what God has made. Because they are unrighteous, they will suppress evidence. They will hold back evidence. And I think that's exactly what happened. I think there are very bright people who study science and do a good job of it. But all of a sudden they get to a point where they have to decide, did this thing happen over long periods of time somehow? Or, boy, it sure looks like it could have happened just bang, just like it is. And then if they discover, hey, I have no way of describing this thing in terms of evolutionary science, they're faced with the other option, which is maybe a designer and a creator, and they say, I don't want to go that way, okay? So they suppress that evidence. And so many of the things that I studied, we had to search just to find information on them because they are not in the textbooks. They just don't put them in because they have no way to explain it. And so they just ignore it.
Now, I find it highly amusing that you lie about the avian thyroid in the European green woodpecker to suit your purpose, and then you come out with this whole conspiracy about evolution and covering up creationism. I make mistakes. I admit that. But I'm not some DVD release guy with a budget. I don't have a stage crew, and I don't have someone to fact check what I say. I am a one-man group. This is it. This is why I refer to such videos as this one as mockumentaries, because they're not dealing with trying to teach people. They're trying to misinform them deliberately in order to brainwash them into God. So yes. Hold on a second. What do you know? This is a rather disturbed essence of thought. Take care and out.